I'm here to tell you if you should keep an eye on Infinite Frontier Joker. Kill me. I'm not going to lie to you guys, this was probably my least anticipated figure from this brand new McFarlane wave in early 2023 that was composed of the Hush Batman, the Nightfall Catwoman, Kingdom Come, Armored Batman, Gladiator Batman, all the works. This was the guy that I looked at and thought to myself, I don't know if I'm even gonna pick him up, and if I do, am I really gonna do a full-length review? Obviously, spoilers, I did in fact end up doing that because you're watching this video, but at a time I was teasing the idea of whether to do a review entirely, or I should at least compromise and do a shorts on him. Well, I'm actually kind of glad that I did do a full-length review, because otherwise I wouldn't be going into some of the details as to why this guy slowly kind of won me over, especially since, if you've noticed from watching some of the videos on the channel, but also simply just keeping track of the figures that I've been collecting, I've been chronicling amongst my social media, whether it be Instagram, Twitter, or the community feed here on YouTube, I don't really collect too many Jokers. Yes, I'm going for a full Batman complete collection as far as McFarlane's, but Jokers haven't really impressed me enough to have a mainstay in my collection. And even in my initial review for the 3 Jokers Clown and Criminal figures, those weren't really doing it for me. There was something about them that I just wasn't thoroughly impressed, and they didn't actually stay in my collection. This guy actually does stand a chance, because even though I did have some reservations, specifically in certain parts of the body where I feel like they might have gone back to that blueprint of the 3 Jokers, or the 3 Joker, Clown, and Criminal, especially the Clown. I believe that's the one that had the lighter shade of the purple suit and the smiling face and all the classic attributes of the Joker in terms of his outfit. I feel like they might have replicated a few of those pieces, or at least felt heavily inspired when it came to designing and sculpting pieces of the body, specifically pretty much the whole bottom half of the Infinite Frontiers Joker here. Specifically around the pants, you can see an awful lot of the creasing and the molding, very reminiscent of that figure. And then when you rotate it back, you have, of course, an awful lot of characteristics throughout the kind of penguin style suit back here, and the rubberized pieces that very much harken back to those 3 Jokers figures. And again, I really wasn't impressed with those figures, so when I was looking at some of the promo shots and this guy was getting ramped up to get released, I really wasn't impressed. Here's the thing, I can't dispel those heavy inspirations from the 3 Jokers figures that are still a little bit of a turnoff for me, but as I handled the figure a bit more and took a closer look at the outfits, especially when we start to get into some differences here in the middle torso area with the vest underneath the black shirt, it started to win me over. I actually do like the way that this is all thoroughly sculpted and painted and creased up within the rubberized piece, and it's also not as hollowed out and cheapy feel as those 3 Jokers, Criminal, and Clown, because those guys, there was just something about them that felt off in hand. It felt kind of cheap, they felt kind of just thrown together. This guy doesn't. This guy actually does feel solid, firm, and very quality, and not as hollowed out as some of those other figures, and you can actually feel like you're getting your money's worth when navigating this torso area. And then the head sculpt is actually really well painted, decked out, and sculpted, especially with the Super Saiyan hair that he's got going on right there. The only thing that could definitely be a point of contention is going to be that ginormous neck right underneath the head. And of course, you can, for the most part, mask it a little bit due to the exaggerated features of the Infinite Frontier Joker, as you see right there, especially when he's kind of in a more neutral position. But once we get into some movement of the head, which we'll tackle much more broadly in articulation, you can then definitely notice the elongated head here. That may be a turnoff for some people. I'll tell you this, what I definitely thought was going to be a turnoff for me is then taking a closer look at the face, and despite praising the makeup and paint apps, I really did not know how I was going to feel about the poked out eye. They decided to give him a Popeye style kind of look, and if you'll notice, he is winking. So I thought to myself, alright, I thought that was a personality thing. It really wasn't until I saw some in-hand photos on Reddit, not even the promo shots. I don't know how I could have missed this. Maybe I'm just getting that old, or debilitating in eyesight. I am a glasses wearer. But I didn't even notice that on the left hand they sculpted his eye. He actually ended up taking out his eye. Now, I haven't read Infinite Frontier. I don't know if this is a specific plot device lifted from that comic arc, but he actually poked his eye out, and he's dangling it in between his fingers on his left hand. And so there's a little bit of a backstory here that I do appreciate the storytelling happening within the figure. I really love it when companies, specifically McFarlane, likes to incorporate some story details into their figures. It gives them a little bit of personality, and that's definitely coming across very well here with this Joker. But much like I talked about recently with the Two-Face figure from the Dark Knight Trilogy wave, as we have this embedded into the figure and permanently sculpted, there's only really one pose that you can really do, which is, of course, the one that you see before you here, where he's definitely showing off the eye in full splendor. Once you get him into a neutral position, then you're going to have some issues as far as accuracy and definitive portrayal, but there's no denying that he's going to make for a really great conversation starter on the shelf. And in order to show off the little detail with the eye, we need to get him moving. So we need to tackle articulation. The head, like I mentioned before, once you're able to get past the ginormous ass neck right there that is reminiscent of the aliens from Attack of the Clones, you're able to rotate the head 360. Not much in the way of tilting. You can slightly move it upwards, but it pretty much comes to a standstill when crunching it inwards. There's almost no kind of incline towards the bottom, so that's pretty much copped right out. But you are able to slightly tilt the head left and right, and that's slightly disappointing only because this is the Joker. This is one of the characters that just oozes personality and character when he does his head tilt. You kind of have to need him to do that, you know what I'm saying? So to not be able to do it as much as you would have liked, or at least like some other Joker figures, it's a little bit of a bummer. Thankfully, the arms are much like your traditional McFarlane, especially because of the way that the outfit is cut here at the shoulder area. You are able to move the arms 360 degrees vertically, as well as extend them towards the sides very generously. Bicep swivels are pretty traditional. They're actually a bit more horizontal than the usual cup designs like some other Jokers have had. The two joints at the elbow are fully able to bend on both arms, and then the hands themselves are also able to rotate 360 as well as move inwards and outwards, and they're actually very flexible when it comes to the moving of the up and down, and that's because I noticed that they cut off a little bit more of the cuffs. And usually when it comes to these Jokers, the typical complaint that I always have is that the cuffs on both the sleeves as well as the pants are going to limit the hands and feet as far as movability, and that doesn't seem to be the case too much here. So much so that even the shoulders have a little bit of shrugging going on. It's not as fully articulated as some others, but there's actually a little bit of that going on right there, so that's very commendable. Little bit lacking in the rotation of or at least the movement of the torso, because rotation is fully on display right there at the waist area. You are able to rotate 360, but not much in the way of crunching. So even though I was praising the torso for not being as hollowed out and cheap feeling as some of the other Jokers have done, you are a little restricted in the mobility. You are slightly able to crunch, as you see before you there, and slightly extend towards the back, but it kind of starts to recede back to where it used to be. But there is mobility there to be found, so you are able to work with something, as well as slight crunching from left to right, but that's really kind of the gist of it. Once we get down to the legs, you are able to fully move the legs forwards about that far, and slightly towards the back. It starts to break away a little bit right there, but thankfully there is some movement there that is not necessarily restricted due to the flexibility of the coat right there, and some really good extension towards the sides via that joint, and the cutout of the diaper allows that full on display right there you see before you. Two joints at the knee that are fully able to bend all the way up and are ratcheted, so really good work right there on the joints. A little stiff to get back into place, but at least that is going to be able to create poses and not be too frustrating to pose. Then, like I mentioned before, because they decided to pull back just a little bit on, it's almost like they listened. That's crazy. I'm not going to take full credit for this, but I'm hoping that it's reaching some designers and Todd's ears that at least with some of these Jokers, or at least characters that like to wear suits an awful lot, they're not fully bringing down the cuffs all over the joint, whether it be for the wrists or for the ankles. Because here, the ankles are fully able to rotate 360 degrees, and they are able to move up and down. They only do one notch, but for some reason, the travel distance, or if you want to use gamer terms, the dead zones, are able to move just a little bit more. You know what I'm saying? So even though it's only going up and down one notch like some others, that notch in and of itself is actually moving and traveling much farther than some others I have dealt with. So that is actually really, really interesting, and it feels good in hand, as well as the rotation right there. And then, of course, the toesies are not only halfway through the foot, so it's more so like footsies rather than toesies, but they're fully able to bend up like that. So as mentioned, the articulation, despite going kind of against the grain of the fixed position you have dealing with here in the eye being embedded into the hand, and then the winky face is kind of just calling for this pose right here where he's kind of showing it off. At least they managed to compensate with really good articulation that feels great in hand and allows flexibility through and through. And the quality build behind the figure that feels much better than some prior Jokers that I have dealt with, it's actually winning me over. So I thought to myself, is there anything else that could be added to the figure that won't necessarily blow me away, but will at least help its case? It would actually be this dagger that they threw in. And let me explain. Even though we've had daggers with McFarlane figures before, especially for characters that don't typically use daggers or knives, although the Joker could probably be an exception, I feel like Infinite Frontier Joker is most often characterized by either his calling card, the Joker card, or maybe some other kind of firearm. That's obviously not going to be the case with the current dealings that McFarlane has to go through, but what I can kind of give some praise over for is that there's an awful lot of personality already seeping through this dagger alone. I like the chrome finish on the blade, but also the little cutout here on the backside, as well as the way it kind of curves towards the tip. But you also see that little comic book style curling happening on not only the hand guard, but this little piece here towards the bottom of the dagger that, again, just oozes personality. It actually feels like it's lifted from the pages, and it also fits pretty well in hand. Not only that, but they sculpted one of his hands, in fact, the only hand that he's able to hold the dagger in. They sculpted it not only to be friendly to hold the dagger in place and actually fit very firmly in there and make it convenient to do so, but again, kind of going back to that personality that I love when McFarlane is able to have kind of fun with their designs. He's actually holding the pinky up when doing so it just looks very staple like Joker. Like, this is what Joker would look like if he was holding up a knife. It actually kind of makes sense. So much so that I would probably pose him like this to make it look like he's looking at himself in the reflection of the dagger, just to see what it looks like with him holding his eye out and being like, oh, hey, how bad do I look? Look at this. Look at this. This actually does look impressive and funny. And, of course, you would want the Joker to be funny. So, yeah, I'll come clean. I somewhat had the intention to want to return this guy after I was done with the review because I just really wasn't all that confident that I was going to be impressed. Well, it's time for me to eat my words because Infinite Frontier Joker is actually one of the more impressive Joker figures, and I do feel like I've been a little unfair to the Clown Prince of Crime. I just think that my dealings with him have not been the most favorable, save for the Arkham Asylum Joker, and that's only because I feel like there was a personal bias there, because I love the Arkham Asylum game and that whole franchise as a whole. So for me to obviously gravitate towards that figure and keep him, that was going to be a no-brainer. Infinite Frontier, I haven't read the series, I'm not too infatuated with the material, I'm not really well connected with it, and therefore I actually feel genuinely surprised with myself and with the figure and how much I actually dug the personality, the quality, and the features and articulation, despite, like I said, my own personal bias or preference against having some of these figures be in this premeditated pose with the eye flickering through his hand and the winky face. But it actually won me over the more I played with him and the more I felt him in hand, that I actually really recommend Infinite Frontier Joker, and I'm gonna be giving him a 7 out of 10. I don't know if it's necessarily worthy of like putting down your pre-order right now. It is definitely, however, not a figure to pass up should you come across him at a retail store like Walmart, Target, kind of like I did. And he does look better in person, and he actually does much more wonders for the posability once you are able to circumvent the predetermined fixtures of, like I said, the eye and all those things. If that stuff doesn't really bother you, then I highly recommend that you do pick him up. But if you are moved to the notion of wanting to pre-order him as opposed to waiting to find him in store, then there are going to be links in the description you guys can use. They are affiliate links. They help with the channel, but you are also able to add another Joker to your collection, or at least start your Joker collection and get it a bit more flourishing, kind of like I'm trying to do as well. And while you're at it, YouTube is likely going to be recommending another McFarlane Toys review showing up on screen right now, so go ahead and click that. And as always, stay humble. I'll see you later.